is, I guess, 3 weeks ago. U-shaped being maybe looking a little more like 08 and 09, and I don't need to tell you what L-shaped is, nobody's interested in that. So with that as kind of the overriding idea, which I believe is unanimous in terms of the approach, what we're anticipating are that there's going to have to be a mechanism to keep people paid, keep people employed in the meantime, and have a funding mechanism to do so. And that's certainly what is part of the, or really the emphasis on the bill that you saw passed early morning from the House on Saturday. The Senate's taking that up. There's all sorts of varying reports what's going to come out, but we believe it'll be something along those lines. Of course, one last thing is, you know, if you've been watching the news conferences, you've been seeing you know, Steve Mnuchin talk about this being a baseball game, and this legislation that they're taking up today, possibly even enacting tomorrow or Thursday, who knows, is the second inning, and there's more to be layered on. So as Greg had mentioned, you know, this is the unemployment insurance piece and some of the changes at the state level, but definitely need to make sure that we are watching what's going on the federal level and how that plays in. So stay tuned.
Thanks, Dave. That's kind of an overview of what we're doing and what we're doing. And as Dave mentioned, you know, Dunlap and Seeger, we're monitoring all these changes, and we'll provide you updates as we have them via our social media and website and that sort of thing in these webinars. What Dave was talking about is the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, which again is in the Senate. They're working on that. We hope to see something related to that yet today. But essentially what that's looking to do is amend FMLA to provide federally mandated emergency leave and sick pay for all employees of U.S. businesses who employ fewer than 500 employees, which impacts a lot of us here in Rochester. And we're not sure exactly what is going to be in that final bill, but like I mentioned, it'll change a little bit of the FMLA, and also they are looking to enact a new Paid Leave Act, which can provide for immediate paid leave for employees. Again, this is all pretty fluid, and we don't know what the final bill is going to say, but we can give you a little bit of an overview on that. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to John Beatty.
Good afternoon, everyone. And just before we get to Greg again, who can speak to things we feel relatively certain about here in Minnesota, the concepts that seem to be coming out of the bill that was at least adopted by the House Saturday and that has yet to be passed through the Senate or signed by President Trump includes a few new concepts. Hillary just mentioned this paid family medical leave, expanding on FMLA to include employers of fewer than 500 employees, allowing for 12 weeks of protected and paid leave. There's also a paid sick leave that would, based on qualified eligible employees under a public health emergency, allow for immediately 80 hours of paid sick time. All of these things obviously have not been worked out in terms of how they get funded, but the questions, or at least the eligibility components, include, we expect, someone obviously who's been diagnosed with coronavirus, someone who's been exposed to COVID, someone who is caring for family that's been diagnosed with COVID, someone with school-age children who are home because of school closures, or someone who's been directed by a healthcare provider, employer, or a public health official to stay home. To that last point, given Governor Walz's order last evening, we anticipate that certainly there may be employees already in the state who might qualify under that concept for potential paid sick leave if and when this federal act is adopted. Unclear if that's tonight, tomorrow, sometime yet this week, but we raise it given the questions that remain about how employers and employees ought to respond on a case-by-case basis to what's evolving immediately at the federal level, and then together with what Greg's going to explain to you here this afternoon about what we know here in the state of Minnesota. So thank you, and all of you take care of yourself. Greg can kick off on the unemployment insurance piece.
Okay, so what we don't know, of course, is what they're going to do at the federal level, but what we do know is what's going to happen here at the state level. And but first, before I get into that, the changes in the unemployment law, I just want to start with sort of the basic premise. What Minnesota says about unemployment is it's designed to relieve the hardships caused by involuntary unemployment due to no fault of the employee. So in other words, if an employee loses their job through no fault of their own, they get basic unemployment benefits, and the amounts of which I'll explain in a little while. We have an administration here in Minnesota called the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. DEED is the entity that manages the unemployment system. And all of you that are on the call that employ people are likely aware that you pay a tax on a monthly basis, and it's that tax that funds the system. And the only people that pay the tax are the employer. The employee does not have to pay into that tax. But the basic premise under our system is certain employees qualify, and the first employees who qualify are those who lose their job through no fault of their own, and it comes in two forms. One is somebody who's laid off or terminated for nothing that they did to cause it. And secondly, it's people who have a substantial reduction in their hours. And of course, a phrase like that, substantial reduction, is a phrase that only a lawyer could write. But in essence, it means if you have your hours cut by 30% or more, you'd be eligible for some percentage of unemployment if you're an employee. So in this particular dilemma we're in right now, with everything that's going on, if there are basic layoffs that are related to damage to our economy as a result of COVID-19 and actions taken by government, in theory, everybody negatively impacted by that would qualify for unemployment in some form. But it's also possible, if our federal regulators and legislators manage to pass a law, that we won't even get to the unemployment system because there'll be other benefits available to employees in the form of various paid leaves. Now, there is one type of employee who generally, well, 2 types of employees who don't qualify, and that's employees who quit through no cause on the part of the employer. And the second is employees who are terminated for misconduct. And I'm not going to get into a lengthy definition of those two terms, but the bottom line is if the employee does something to lose their job, that can disqualify them for unemployment